My name is Jennifer Frank, and I'm an attorney with Lynn Jackson, Shultz and Lebrun law firm. I know many of you on the call, and I practice employment law, and I am presenting today on returning employees to work in a COVID-19 era, what employers need to know now. And I am partnering here today with Elevate Rapid City and also in partnership with Black Hills SHRM. So for any of you who need SHRM credits, we have applied for a SHRM credit of 1.0 professional development credit for this webinar. So thanks for joining, and let's get started today with some great information for returning your employees to work in a COVID-19 era. First is my standard disclaimer, and this just means that I'm not providing any specific legal advice to any of you on the call. It's intended more as a general educational purpose only. All right, so let's start out. Obviously, everybody knows that we're in a pandemic. I just kept this slide on to say that we've been in a declared worldwide pandemic since March 11th of 2020. And also the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is CDC, and I'll just refer to CDC in this session by that acronym, had declared a public health emergency. We're still in it, and especially as we know in South Dakota, we are really in it right now. The numbers do keep going up every day. At the end of the day yesterday, I updated these figures to show in South Dakota, our largest current number of cases. Minnehaha County leads the way. They always have since the beginning. So they have over 23,000 known cases of COVID-19, followed by Pennington County. So many of you know Sioux Falls is the largest city in South Dakota. Rapid City is the second largest city in South Dakota. So these figures make sense. Lincoln County, which is over by Sioux Falls, they have the next most at a little bit over 6,000, Brown County, Codington County, and then Brookings County. Many of you may know that Governor Noem, through an executive order, had declared South Dakota to be in a state of emergency, which has been extended through the end of the year. Maybe that will be extended into the new year. So what I would like to do today in this session is I have a few overarching topics. And the first topic is, health and safety in the workplace. At the end of each large topic, I do welcome questions. If you have questions along the way, go ahead and put them in the chat. And then Rachel will monitor those questions. And at the end of each main topic, I'll go ahead and take questions and try to answer those questions that get raised through the chat. So that's how we'll handle that. And I do welcome all questions. All right, so let's start off. I think the most important aspect of returning employees to work in a COVID-19 era is health and safety. I mean, we're in a pandemic. People are afraid, people are getting COVID-19. We are still trying to run our businesses, and I will have a section on remote workers, which comes next. But I think paramount, if we're bringing people back into our workplaces, whatever kind of organization that is, health and safety is at the forefront. So in the physical workspace, or if you're bringing back people to your actual workplace, I do want everyone to be aware of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which is OSHA, has a general duty clause. The general duty clause states that all employers are required to maintain a safe workplace that is free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to employees. Basically, that means we have to provide a safe and hazard-free workplace. And in order to do that, it is essential that employers require employees to follow good sanitation practices and also good personal hygiene practices. So what we want to consider here is requiring our employees to wear personal protective gear, whether that means masks or gloves, observe infection control practices. some of the suggestions from the CDC. They have tips on cleaning and disinfecting, as well as guidance for individual responsibility of employees. So you've probably heard these umpty-ump times, but just to repeat, because it bears repeating, have your employees maintain a social distance of 6 feet between coworkers at all times where possible. If it's not possible to stay beyond 6 feet from each other, make sure the employees are wearing masks and try to limit those interactions to less than 15 minutes. You want to remind your employees to wash their hands frequently with soap and water for 20 seconds. Washing our hands is one of the best ways that we can prevent the spread of disease. Avoid touching one's eyes, nose, or mouth. And in fact, SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, stated that an average adult touches his or her face once every 3 to 4 minutes. I found that fascinating. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I trained myself not to touch my face because we all do it. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're touching our eyes, nose, or mouth. And that's how the virus can get into our body, through those openings that we have in our face. Cleaning shared surfaces often, and then also staying home when sick. Next, employers are really well advised to develop policies surrounding its rules for policies. I've had clients who do a memo to employees. I've had clients do an official policy, making sure that they communicate that to the employees so that employees know what the rules are. Some of the rules can be requiring employees to stay home when they are sick. Obviously, we want to avoid the spread of COVID in the workplace. And if employees have symptoms of COVID-19, they should be either prohibited from coming in or sent home if they are sick. Some of the, you probably know some of the aspects of symptoms of COVID-19, which are either flu, fever, chills type symptoms, coughing, shortness of breath, even headache, diarrhea, vomiting, or nausea have been on the list. And those are some of the main ones. Also, employers should put up posters with guidance and rules. Okay. Now, another thing you consider or should consider is, who do you have coming into your workplace that are not your employees? So, for example, here at Lynn Jackson, we have clients that come in. We've tended to limit those client visits coming in. We do take them, but if they come in, we follow safety protocol of maintaining a social distance of greater than 6 feet and wearing masks at all times. So think about, who are your customers, your vendors, your clients, other third-party people entering your workplace, and what requirements that you will have for them, such as, again, wearing masks. Some of the retail or even food service have installed clear plastic partitions to separate the cashiers, order takers, and people at a counter or cash register from, put that clear plastic partition in between so that they are not getting any, exposure from the customer as the customer is standing in their line. And then, of course, encourage remote meetings when possible, such as Zoom or teleconference, just like we're doing now. Most of the learning is done via Zoom webcast these days. All right, what about mask mandates? We've been hearing a little bit about this in the news, and I wrote an article recently, it's on my website, that has to do with what the different cities around the state have been doing with regard to any mandates relative to safety protocol for COVID-19. And so the mask mandates, just a few days ago, last week, the Rapid City Common Council, it's called, they did a second reading of a proposed mask mandate during their regular meeting, and it was a 5-5, so it was a tie. So the mandate did not pass since it was a tie. They did a lot of discussion on it, and they decided to table the mandate, which would require the wearing of face coverings in indoor public spaces. So it's really recommended. If you guys have been doing some holiday shopping like I have, you've probably seen around the stores, either the stores are requiring a mask to enter in there to do your shopping, or it's highly recommended that you do. Okay, Sioux Falls back in November, they have actually passed an ordinance that mandates masks to be worn by people inside retail businesses and city-owned facilities where 6 feet of social distance cannot be achieved. This mask mandate took effect on November 21st. The downside is for Sioux Falls ordinance, there is no penalty, meaning like they have this ordinance that says masks must be worn, but there is no penalty. So, that's a downside, I guess, of having an ordinance with no like leverage to enforce it. But the upside is that businesses can choose to enforce a mask policy, and then customers can support that business knowing that that business is into health and safety. Masks have been identified by the CDC and other health experts as one of the best ways to slow or stop transmission of COVID-19. Governor Noem has stated that hand washing, in her opinion, is the best way. All right, so then what else can we do when our employees come back to work? Earlier on in the pandemic, the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, had stated that taking employees' temperatures is permissible. We can have employers screen employees to find out what their temperature is. And we know that, having a temperature that is, higher than normal, 98.6, if an employee has something like 100-degree temperature, it could indicate the employee has COVID-19, but it does not necessarily mean that they do. So be aware that taking somebody's temperature does not indicate that they have COVID-19, and some people who don't have a fever have COVID-19. So this is just one method on screening. It's a quick, easy way to do it. If you've taken yourself or your family members to the doctor, they do a quick screening. It's super fast. They just, they don't even have to touch you. They take your temperature with an infrared temperature thing, and it's very, very quick. If you do decide to do it, luckily, these are not considered a medical exam, but you want to do it where it's, you have a business reason to do it, and you want to do it in a fair and equitable manner so that it does not come across or actually be discriminatory towards any protected group. All right, the other considerations are, we went through business sense and non-discrimination. Also, testing if we do testing in the workplace, this is testing. Can we test our employees for the presence of the COVID-19 virus? And it is yes. We can test. Testing will only reveal if the active virus is present. It will not tell us if the person had it. It will not tell us whether the person is going to get it down the road, or maybe they're going to get it in a couple days or something. So testing will only test if the active virus is present. And if we do decide to do testing as an employer, we need to maintain those medical records confidentially in accordance to ADA requirements. One thing to think about is, are accommodations needed, or maybe an employee will ask for an accommodation. If so, maybe there's an alternative that you may need to think about. Also, may need to think about how to handle employees who refuse to be tested. There are some wage and hour issues that are present with regard to testing employees for COVID-19, such as payment for waiting in line to be tested if it's required. How about waiting for the results? These are questions to consider. All right, travel. When the virus first came, started blossoming, so to speak, A lot of companies were really out there with their limitations on employees' travel, and I think even now it probably still makes sense as our COVID-19 figures are increasing. The South Dakota state government, Governor Noem, and the state government has never prohibited travel to or from other states or within the state via an executive order or other legislation. And so therefore, employers are free to control its employees and determine what travel restrictions that employer wishes to impose on its employees. And it can do that as long as it's doing it in a fair and equitable manner. If you do allow people to travel or people travel and you know about it, you might consider having them stay home and quarantine at home for 14 days, especially if they have gone to places which are known hotspots. I guess we're a known hotspot right now, but if they go to a place with a known hotspot, cruise ships, Walt Disney World, the Sturgis Rally, some big concert, you may wish to ask them to stay home and work from home in order to self-quarantine. Telework can still be made available to employees if it is feasible to do so. If it's not feasible for that person to work from home, then you can still ask them to stay at home to self-quarantine. They can use their available paid time off if they have any. And we'll be talking about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act a little bit later in the presentation today. Asking employees to limit their non-essential travel is good, and that will just help to prevent the spread of COVID-19 to other areas in the state or in the country. Okay, what happens if an employee tests positive for COVID-19? When we know that, or they have a close contact, which I'll define in just a second, they should stay home and self-isolate just so that they prevent the spread in the workplace. The CDC had come out with some guidance relating to symptom-based strategy, which is a little bit less broad brush. It's more specific, and it is a little bit less time. So they said that if it has been at least 3 days since the recovery of the individual, which is defined as resolution of fever without taking, Tylenol or any other fever-reducing medications, and their respiratory symptoms have improved, such as cough, shortness of breath, and at least 10 days have passed since they first appeared, then you could return the employee to work. Of course, if you have any sick employees in the workplace, you want to keep them separated and get them sent home as soon as possible. And you can have that be a rule for your workplace. For cleaning, if it's been less than 7 days since the employee has been in the facility, close off those areas. And then the CDC recommends waiting 24 hours before cleaning in order to minimize any exposure to respiratory droplets. And of course, you can open the doors, open the windows, just to increase, fresh air circulation. If it has been more than 7 days since the employee used the facility, then any additional cleaning is not necessary or not necessarily necessary. Routine cleaning, and of course, paying attention to all high-touch surfaces in the business. Employers don't have to report a COVID-19 event, such as a positive, if an employee tests positive. I have called the South Dakota Department of Health, and they told me that the healthcare provider is the one with the duty to report that to the South Dakota Department of Health. If you know that an employee has COVID-19, or maybe they were a close contact to someone with COVID-19 and they're out, and then the employees in the workplace might have been a close contact to that person, you will want to inform other employees of possible COVID-19 exposure or close contact, but do not reveal the name of the person, and just maintain ADA confidentiality requirements So you will just inform them of the fact, but not name the individual. Consider your clients, customers, vendors, and other third parties. On October 21st of 2020, CDC issued a revised definition of who it means to be a close contact. And now it is defined as someone who is within 6 feet of an infected person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more, and over the course of a 24-hour period of time. So when we're dealing with other coworkers in the workplace, it's best to have, if you're not able to maintain that social distance of 6 feet, it's best to have very limited, quick little meetings so that your cumulative total of being with any particular person does not total 15 minutes or more in a one-day period. But if you have any customers, clients, or vendors who fit the definition of a close contact, you will want to consider notifying them of that fact. All right, the CDC has some guidelines for businesses reopening, even ones that have remained open. It's still a relevant set of guidance. Number one is to prevent and reduce transmission among employees. You can do daily health checks, keeping sick employees separated, keeping sick employees home, and educating employees about the preventative and protective steps that they can take. There are posters either from the CDC or SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, has posters that you can place around your workplace. And we do that here at Lynn Jackson, such as in the bathroom, reminding employees to wash their hands and avoid touching their face, maintaining social distance, and cleaning any areas. Next, maintaining healthy business operations means that we are going to try to be flexible if possible with our sick leave policies and practices. Communicating policies is really important to keep that communication going. If our absenteeism increases, we want to think about ways to keep our operations going. Again, can people work from home? Who could work from home? Who is essential to be in the office or in the workplace? And thinking about those in a proactive manner. And then, of course, social distancing. And finally, maintaining a healthy work environment by providing hand washing stations, ensuring there's good ventilation, providing hand sanitizer like everywhere. You guys have probably seen that at the stores. Every cash, every lane has their own hand sanitizer, and many businesses make it available throughout their stores. Face coverings, tissues, teaching people to not sneeze without their mask on. If you're sneezing into your arm, if you don't have a tissue, avoid touching your face, routine cleaning, encouraging video conferencing and phone calls, eliminating in-person meetings, social distancing, and limiting travel. Some critical infrastructure employees or essential employees may be permitted to return to work in a quicker time frame. The time frame is having contact with an individual includes the period of time of 48 hours before the individual became, symptomatic, provided they remain asymptomatic, and precautions are taken to protect them from themselves and others when they return to the workplace. Some practices are pre-screening. We've talked about that already. Regular monitoring. People should always just self-monitor almost like every day. You guys might have been doing this too. You wake up and you assess yourself. How do I feel today? Do I feel well? Do I feel healthy? Do I have any of the symptoms? And you kind of do that check for yourself. Wearing a mask, is of course very highly recommended. Social distancing and cleaning. So we've gone over all that. I wanted to let you guys know that yesterday some new guidance came out from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, that talked about vaccinations. We have seen on the news lately that Pfizer and other companies have come out with a COVID-19 vaccination, and they are starting to be distributed even here in Rapid City. Some, Monument Health and West Hills Village, I think, have received some vaccinations for their employees and patients and residents. But can we require, as an employer, employees to be vaccinated? This does raise several EEO laws, including Americans with Disabilities Act, Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which also includes Pregnancy Discrimination Act. Generally speaking, these employment laws that I've just mentioned do not interfere with or prevent employers from following CDC guidelines or any other public authority suggestions or guidelines. You are allowed to provide a vaccine or require a vaccine. You'll want to consider whether your requirement for employees to get it is job related and consistent with business necessity. So I think we can think of a few different types of industries, such as healthcare, where maybe having the employees be vaccinated would be key. For example, with healthcare employees, employers in that industry have always been able to require employees who do patient care to require them to get a flu shot. And so this is similar analysis to that. So just administering a vaccination, if the employer or a contracted for a third party is going to do it, is fine. But if you ask screening questions, then these screening questions would be subject to the ADA standard for disability-related inquiries, because they would bring out information potentially about someone's disability. And therefore, you again want to make sure that if you are asking any type of screening questions, that these inquiries are job-related and consistent with business necessity. The ADA does require, again, that employee medical information be confidential. And employers can require employees to show proof of a COVID-19 vaccination. This in and of itself is not a disability-related inquiry. If the employer asks an employee why they have not been vaccinated, then that type of question would be subject to the ADA standard, that the questions be job-related and consistent with business necessity. So just evaluate these different considerations. The employer can warn the employee not to provide medical information as part of the proof that that employee has been vaccinated, in order to avoid implicating the ADA. One of the things that employers are or should be concerned about is not wanting to create a direct threat to others in the workplace. So if an employer does have a safety-based standard, such as, no direct threat allowed, and if this standard screens out people with a disability, the employer must be able to demonstrate that that unvaccinated employee would pose a direct threat to others and compromise the health or safety that could not be eliminated or reduced by a reasonable accommodation. Then the employer may need to consider reasonable accommodations, whether disability related or religious related. Okay. All right. At this time, Rachel, we are at the end of section A. Were there any questions relating to health and safety in the workplace?
We don't have any at this time, so I think we can keep moving forward. But of course, at any time, feel free to ask questions and we will get back to them.
Okay, perfect. All right. The next topic is remote or telework options. This has been really the year of the remote worker, and there's been a lot of attention given to remote and telework options, not only now, but also as kind of a wave of the future. We're going to go through some pros and cons. I'm going to raise some issues and explore some of the issues with you. But it may be a wave of the future where we see continued remote work being a choice of employers and employees together. So first, we do know that remote and telework options are popular. Many employers have been flexible to allow the remote and telework options to keep people away from each other and from the actual workplace while still being productive in their own home workspace or away from the regular workplace. It allows employees to social distance from each other. The advantages of telework options have been cited as increased productivity. People aren't bogged down with some of the, office things that can distract us or bog us down. So we can just concentrate on our work, and it has been shown to increase productivity. Also, you're not having to commute, so you save time that way, just being at home and being more able to work. Increased employee health and morale. Some people like the fact that they are given this flexibility. It's enabling them to balance their work and their life and their family and children. So that has been cited as a benefit. Cutting down on employee commuting has been cited as a time saver, as well as an environmental or green type consideration. Employers can save approximately $11,000 per employee on office costs and expenses, such as overhead, electricity, cleaning, heating, air conditioning, whatever it is. Reducing the carbon emissions is environmental. I saw one article where they cited to the economic benefits of employees having more time to shop online. So I don't know if that was kind of a funny one to me, but I included it because it was cited in an article. It is seen as an employee benefit insofar as flexibility and allowing people to do what works best for them. And then some view it as a good employee relations measure and improving employee engagement. On the disadvantages, it can be isolating. Motivation may be lost if you're not around other people. Even if you're on those Zoom meetings, sometimes do you really feel connected to others like you would in an in-person meeting? Some of the downsides too are communication, maybe not as good. Messages can get lost. How about maintaining privacy, confidentiality, and avoiding interruptions when you're in a home environment? People can barge in on you. There's a lot going on in our households in and of itself, generally speaking. So when you're trying to be in your home office, and some people don't even have an actual, office with a door. So if you're working at your dining room table and others are around homeschooling, or, you have a spouse who's also teleworking at home, it can be distracting. And again, confidentiality and security concerns are present as well. Some of the legal and other issues that I'm going to talk about now have to do with pay of the workers. So our employees, if they're non-exempt, meaning they're hourly employees and they're working from home so that they're being paid by the hour, how do we know when they're working? How do we know if they're doing their work? When are they on the clock? What about their work performance? We're going to talk about all that. Exempt employees are different than the non-exempt employees insofar as exempt employees get paid a salary for the work week, regardless of the quantity or quality of the work that they perform. But still, is the quantity or quality of an exempt employee's work going to suffer because they're at home? And who's measuring that? And how do we hold these employees accountable for their work, the quality and quantity? Another consideration is that our home office space is actually our workplace where we're doing work on behalf of the employer. And so now, as an employer, we have to think about workers' compensation and how it applies to the workspace, but not the rest of the home. If the employee leaves their home office space to go do laundry or go to the kitchen to get a snack, that should not be their work area. And so we have to specifically designate what is their home office space. Another issue is whose equipment and internet does the employee use? What about reimbursements? We're going to talk about that in a minute. So who provides it? Does the employer provide it? Is the employer going to require the employee to use their own computer, internet, supplies, and things like that? And then finally, we're going to talk about employee communication and what is required. We're going to talk about how the employee will be evaluated, or how should we manage the performance? What about being on Zoom meetings? What about coming into the office? These are all things that we need to think about. And I guide my clients to utilize a remote work agreement, which the employer and the employee can sign, and it details it basically outlines that arrangement and states who's going to do what and what needs to be done. With teleworking, we should definitely specify the length of the work assignment. Do not promise indefinite work from home, because at some point you may need to call employees back into your workplace. And consider developing a telecommuting policy and procedure. All right, so let's look at expense reimbursement. This question was raised in advance by one of the participants, and I was appreciative of that, so that we can address it head on. What are the business-related expenses being incurred by employees? And we think about it, if you're working at home, say you're working on a computer and not like making widgets or something, you will be on a computer that needs internet connection. You need electricity. You probably need a printer with paper, and then you have all your pens, pencils, stapler, etc., whiteout, whatever. Other hardware and software. You have your furniture, and then you may need to have your cell phone or smartphone as well. You might need a camera. For example, I don't have a camera on my home computer, so if I need to do something where I need to have people do a Zoom meeting with me and I'm at home, I just use my phone. But with the phone, then you have your bill for the cell phone as well as the actual phone itself. So we have to think about who's going to pay for what. Under South Dakota law, there is a state statute that we have called indemnification of employee by employer. And an employer must indemnify an employee for what he or she expends or loses in direct consequence of the discharge of his or her duties. That means that if I am doing a job for my employer and I have to travel somewhere, the employer should reimburse me for my mileage or gas spent in doing that duty for the employer. The Federal Fair Labor Standards Act just states that an employer must reimburse expenses incurred if the expense causes the earnings of the employee to fall below the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25 per hour. Employees may request additional office items such as a stand-up desk. And I've had a few questions from clients regarding what do we do when an employee who's teleworking asks for a stand-up desk. The quick answer to that is that unless it's relating to a disability of the employee such that it is a request for a reasonable accommodation, then it's just a desired item. And then we have to inquire why the employee wants it if it's not a true accommodation, and determine whether or not we're going to buy it and install it for the employee. And then I had a question too, where an employer was like, well, somebody wanted a stand-up desk, and we're like, fine, but who goes into the employee's house? People don't necessarily want to go into other people's houses right now. So who was going to do the install? And that actually ended up being a question, who was going to do it. How about IT, technology, hardware? Who's going to manage that? Is it up to the employee to manage their own computer? And if it, has a problem, to call, to get it fixed or managed, or will the company manage it? And would the company send an employee to the worker's home office, which we just talked about? So really think about procedures that need to be developed to ensure smooth operational flow and address in advance any issues that you can think of that may arise. The workflow and communication, thinking about how work is going to be assigned, how work is going to be received, how does an employee provide their completed work product or project? Are regular meetings expected and scheduled, such as Zoom, or are there any in-person meetings that need to be attended? What level of communication is expected from our employees? What is the manner and method of that communication? And what is the frequency that is expected? How about, see, I did that. How do we measure employees' time? We talked about some wage and hour issues. How do we measure the employees' time? So, non-exempt workers who are hourly workers are paid by the hour. Any hour that they are suffered or permitted to work, how it is defined in the actual statute, meaning if they do work, they are entitled to be paid for it. So think about that when, some employees get up at 4 a.m. and start working. Is that something that's authorized, and is that something that you want to allow? If an employer knows about the time worked, or it should have known, then it is on the hook for paying the employee's hours worked. You want to develop a policy to determine and advise employees that they are not to work outside of scheduled hours. And if they do so, they can be subject to disciplinary action. Managers should be trained and instructed how to not allow any off the clock or unscheduled work by remote workers. And you will want to think about any timekeeping policies that you have that may need to be revised. Back in August, the Federal Department of Labor discussed the employer's duty to still track compensable hours worked of remote workers. So how will you monitor their time? Will you look at their computer time? Will you review login and logout times? Will you require the daily or weekly timesheets? So some things to think about. Performance management. We still need to have our workers who are remote, we still need them to perform and do their job. So we need to figure out as an employer how we will measure the performance and productivity and develop procedures and protocol that relate to that. What is the frequency that employees will turn in their work assignment? Establishing to-do lists can be a recommended practice, and doing maybe a daily check-in with employees from their manager, maybe having a team meeting every day or once a week, making sure that you still have measurable productivity goals and priorities and deadlines, determining the performance management process, and consider still how are you going to do your performance reviews and how will they be conducted in a remote world. Okay, SHRM the other day had 5 tips for managing an underperformer who is a remote worker. And the tips are: number 1, revise your expectations. Number 2, learn more about them. Number 3, level with them and be specific, so that you're not, sugarcoating anything, being honest with them. Number 4, help them learn how to improve their own performance. And number 5, staying in close enough contact with them. Some different research places that do consulting and research have come out with some different statistics that I found interesting. This one place called the Global Workplace Analytics firm, which they work on helping employers to prepare for the future of work, estimated that working at home will save the United States employers over $30 billion per day in what would otherwise have been lost productivity during office closures due to COVID-19. So that's a pretty staggering statistic, showing that, remote work is still here, and it's probably going to be here in some form or another for the next several years, really. The same firm estimated that by the end of 2021, 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home on multiple days per week. Another consultancy firm called Towers Watson states that workers will continue to work from home. They estimate that about 19% of full-time workers will remain working at home. And then there was another survey called the PwC consultancy survey, and that was done in June of 2020. So, several months back, but they did study 1,200 remote workers and survey them, and 72% stated that they would like to continue working from away from the office on a basis of 2 days per week. And then 32% stated they would like to remain a remote worker on a permanent full-time basis. Another firm stated that in their survey, 52% of people responding stated they wanted to continue to work remotely even after the pandemic ends. So what should we do? We should definitely think about whether remote makes sense, whether continuing it makes sense. Should we ask our employees to return to the physical workplace? And it really depends on the nature of your business. Think about people's job roles and what are the expectations and duties for that job. And then also consider balancing flexibility and the potential upsides with the needed productivity and performance on the other side, as well as costs involved. Okay. At the end of this section, Rachel, were there any questions on remote working?
Nope, I have not seen any come through.
Great. All right, what I want to do now is spend just a little bit of time on Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It's the FFCRA, and I don't want to spend a ton of time. We have maybe 10 to 20 minutes left of this webinar, but I didn't want to fail to mention it because it's still in place and it is effective through the end of this year. So it is in place effective through December 31st of 2020. And it is an amendment to the Family and Medical Leave Act that requires paid leave in certain qualifying circumstances. So I just want to skim over it. I left all of the slides that I've had on it from other presentations so that you have that information. But I'm just going to kind of skim over it for about 10 minutes, just so that you're aware of the main nuggets of this particular act. So first, I want to say that there has been no word yet from the Department of Labor as to whether this particular act, the FFCRA, will be extended into 2021. We think that it might be. I have seen some things that state, with incoming President Biden, there may be a favorable, desire to continue this because the pandemic isn't going to necessarily end as of, 1/1/2021. So it may be that it will get extended, but as of this particular point in time, it has not officially been extended by Congress. All right, so I want to just cover a few of the highlights of FFCRA so you're aware of what it is, and I'll probably skip over a few slides, but you've got them in case you wanted to look at them. Eligible employees are employees who, under the paid sick leave portion, are immediately eligible for that leave. And for expanded family and medical leave, there is a 30-day employment requirement for that particular portion of the act. Covered employers are any private entity with fewer than 500 employees, as well as certain public sector employees. For the emergency paid sick leave, it's 80 hours that's paid, but only in the situation where an employee is unable to work or unable to telework because they are either subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. If the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns relating to COVID-19, if the employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and they are seeking a medical diagnosis. So there you have to have both parts of that in order to be a qualifying reason. Also, if the employee is caring for an individual in items 1 through 3, if they're caring for their child, if the school is closed, or if the child care provider is unavailable for reasons relating to COVID-19, those are the reasons for paid sick leave. Paid sick leave is not available, or even the expanded family and medical leave. It's not available when your children's school is closed because of winter vacation, or it's the end of the academic semester, because that is not a COVID-related reason. That's just the fact that it's winter break. So FFCRA leave will not apply when your kids start their winter break in a couple days. A child is defined as a child under 18 years of age, or if they're 18 years of age or older and incapable of self-care because of a mental or physical disability. Then we talked about 80 hours being available. If they're part-time, then it is prorated. I'm going to skip over some of this pay issue just in the essence of time. However, for the paid sick leave, it is $511 per day cap. And then the cap in the aggregate is $5,110 if it's for reason 1 through 3, and then $200 per day and a $2,000 cap total for reasons 4 through 6 that I've identified in the slide above. We can have employees use their emergency paid sick leave before any other time off that they may have accrued. So just keep that in mind. I do recommend developing a procedure for requesting the paid sick leave if you haven't already done that. Essentially, we have 2 weeks left to what we know is the effective date of this law. So I don't want to belabor this if you guys have already developed your policies and procedure. Okay, so develop your policy and determine what documents you want employees to provide. The FFCRA has stated that in the case of a quarantine order, only the name of the governmental entity or healthcare provider is needed for documentation. And if the person who's advised to self-quarantine is not the employee, then the person's name and relation to the employee. If the school's closed or the daycare is unavailable, we just need the name and age of the child and the name of the school or place of care that's been closed. That's all that is needed for documentation. For if your child is, their school's closed, we do need the employee to provide a representation that no other suitable person will be providing care when the employee is receiving the leave. And if the child is older than 14 years old and the employee states that they need to take care of that child during daylight hours, the IRS actually recommends or requires that a statement be provided from the employee describing the special circumstances that exist which require the employee to provide such care. The sick leave does not carry over beyond December 31st, and it is not paid out upon separation of employment. There are some job protections and non-retaliation aspects under the FFCRA. For expanded family and medical leave, as I mentioned earlier, the employee has to be employed for at least 30 days, and employees may take the leave, but only if work is otherwise available to them. The reason for this leave is where employees are unable to work or telework because of a bona fide need to take care of their child or children when the school or daycare is closed for reasons that are related to COVID-19. We have the same definition of child as before. A child care provider is fairly broad. It can be a center-based child care provider, a group home child care provider, a family child care provider, another licensed provider of services for compensation, or even somebody who is a relative of the child, so long as that person is over 18 and they are at the direction of the parent. School means elementary or secondary school only, and employees have up to 12 weeks of this type of leave. The first 10 days of this leave are unpaid, and employees are able to substitute any paid sick leave under the FFCRA that they have not utilized for being able to be paid for the first 10 days of this kind of leave. Also, if the employer is already subject to the FMLA, the total is 12 weeks in a 12-month period for any kind of FMLA leave, whether it's FFCRA or, due to an employee's own serious health condition. So just keep in mind that the total is 12 weeks in a 12-month period. So we've gone over that slide already on how the employee can substitute the first 10 days, which are unpaid, with any other form of paid accrued leave, including paid sick leave under the FFCRA. Employer should maintain the employee's health benefits during the leave, continuing to make payroll deductions to collect the employee's share of the premium. So keep that in mind as well. Written notice should be required when possible. I like to advise my clients to prepare a form so that employees can fill out the form and provide needed information. Okay, we have the statement that's required when caring for a child. We've gone over those requirements already. So the form can have some blanks so that the employee can provide the needed information. There is a poster for the FFCRA. I've provided the web link there. It's a PDF. Employers who, even if an employer claims an exemption under the FFCRA, they're still required to post the poster. And so you want to post it in a conspicuous place like the employee break room or any other place where employees are going to see it. All right, there are a couple of exemptions under the FFCRA, and really quickly, there's a small business exemption if you have fewer than 50 employees, and providing the FFCRA leave would cause your business to become jeopardized and jeopardize the viability of that business. The officer of the business needs to determine if one of three conditions is satisfied in order to claim this exemption, and they are, putting the company at financial risk, because then business revenues would be exceeded by the financial obligations in providing this leave. There may be another financial, health, or operational risk because of specialized skills or knowledge that the employees have related to the business, or maybe there wouldn't be sufficient workers willing and qualified who would be able to keep the operations going at a minimal capacity. If an employer is claiming this exemption, they should not send information or materials into the Department of Labor or the IRS to claim the small business exemption. They should document it and keep those notes internally. There's a healthcare provider exemption that healthcare providers can claim. Healthcare provider is the definition was updated as to who is a healthcare provider. That definition was updated in September. There are two groups of healthcare providers. The first group is doctors of medicine, nurse practitioner, or other healthcare provider who typically issue and are permitted to issue medical certification for purposes of the FMLA. But the second group is any workers of an entity who are, their job is to diagnose, prevent, treat, necessary to the provision of patient care. Technicians, nurses, doctors, those types of employees. Other employees who do not provide direct health care, but are integral. Maybe somebody like a lab technician or somebody who processes test results would be considered healthcare providers. Healthcare providers were clarified not to include, people who are employed and they're employed by a healthcare entity, but they are in the area of things like HR, food service workers, IT professionals, accounting, consulting, billing, that sort of thing. They are not considered healthcare providers. Healthcare providers, even if they want to claim the exemption to be exempted from the FFCRA, they should think about whether they truly want to exempt workers. Maybe they want to provide sick leave in the case of an employee getting COVID-19 and provide paid sick leave. Intermittent work is available, meaning separate periods of time if the employee needs that to care for their child. And the DOL has reaffirmed its position that employer approval is required for the intermittent leave. Telework is, something that is still something employers can provide, and then the employee can maybe telework intermittently with some hours being paid leave and other hours being regular working time. Okay, I'm going to, just in the essence of time, I'd like to just skip over some of this relating to the FFCRA, just because, again, there's only 2 more weeks left of it, and hopefully by now many people are familiar with its requirements. There are tax credits that are available for every qualifying paid leave that an employer pays. It can get a tax credit for that same amount on its tax return. The maximums that we've gone over apply. All right, Rachel, were there any questions on the FFCRA?
We had 2, and this I think was to the other one, working remotely. Should it be a gradual, slow return to working in the office? It would be hard to know when COVID ends.
Yeah, it's hard to know when COVID ends, and really as we saw in the first slide, we're seeing an increase in cases. And so I feel like, even though we're considering should we return employees to work now, I think it's an individual organizational determination about, again, weighing the costs and benefits of returning workers now. If you can continue remote work, that's great. And maybe continuing that will be a great option for some employers. I've been in my office even from the day one of COVID-19. I've been in my office, and I just come into my office and I shut the door and I limit my interaction with anybody else. But I prefer to work in my office here in my building rather than in my home office. So part of it is, what does the employer want to do with regard to its flexibility, and what does it need to do given its business operations? So it's kind of a balancing act there. Hopefully that answers that question.
Great. And then they're just wondering if they would have access to the slides, if it's okay that we send a PDF of the slides.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep. That's it for questions right now.
All right. This next section is probably not supposed to be entitled B here, probably D. I just wanted to review quickly some of the reemployment assistance benefits. This is what you would call unemployment insurance. And the South Dakota Reemployment Assistance Program generally provides financial assistance on a temporary basis to employees who have lost their job through no fault of their own. Employees may have their hours cut, employees might get furloughed, and sometimes employees get terminated by their employer all the way. And so there are many variables that affect whether somebody gets unemployment or reemployment insurance or not. The South Dakota Reemployment Assistance Benefits webpage on the Department of Labor's website does a good job, and it has a handout, and I put the different items from that handout right here on these next two slides. When is a worker eligible for reemployment for reasons relating to COVID-19? If a worker has tested positive for COVID-19 and they are temporarily unable to work, they would be eligible. If the employer is out of work because their employer closed due to COVID-19, they would be eligible. If they had their hours reduced because of COVID-19, then they probably will be eligible depending upon the number of hours that have been reduced and how much earnings they have for the week. If they are a risk or the employer thinks they are a risk related to COVID-19, then they can get unemployment so long as they're not being paid by the employer in another fashion while they're at home. And then when an employer is ineligible is if they choose to self-quarantine and make themselves unavailable for work, or if the employee is unable to work because they are caring for a child, for example. Okay. The CARES Act of 2020 provided an additional $600 in a weekly benefit, but the expiration date of that has already passed. Retroactive payment will be made if a claimant is found to be eligible. I've provided the web link for the DOL state on COVID-19 right there, so you can look on there for yourself. It did come up the other day that there is a second round of CARES Act grants for small businesses, nonprofits, and startups. So if you are a small business that has less than 38.5 million in revenue, then this additional CARES Act grants are available. You can apply for it. It is a very quick turnaround, only a few more days to apply, and the portal is open through 12/20 at midnight. If you go onto covid.sd.gov, they have some resources available, including a PowerPoint, one-page informational sheet for either business, nonprofit, or startup. And then the call center is available Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 Central Time. You can call with questions. I wanted to conclude our presentation today with some just trends for the future. I know the question earlier was like, how do we know when to end the remote work? Should we end remote work? And really it's a business by business decision. But I thought these 6 major trends that came out in a recent article by an author named Teresa Agovino for SHRM, she identified 6 major business trends that companies may expect to see all the way until 2025. So this is kind of like a wave of the future, what we're going to see in the workplace. Number 1, as we've talked about, we think more employees will work from home, either on a permanent or occasional basis, and that will continue. A survey found that 82% of executives stated that they intend to allow employees to continue working remotely at least part of the time, and nearly half stated that they would allow employees to remotely work on a full-time basis. 36% stated that they were willing to hire workers who were 100% remote and live anywhere in the world. So we're seeing this as being maybe a business advantage of having remote workers, regardless of where that worker is located. Many employers are considering shrinking their actual physical workplace or real estate and adopting a hoteling model rather than designating a specific office place for a specific person, and the workplace or workspace will become more agile. Another survey by SHRM showed that 65% of employers state that remote workforce has been a challenge regarding employee morale. And I think that is true. I think it depends on the person, you know, the remote worker. I don't feel like I work really well when I'm isolated by myself. I like a lot of interaction, and also companies have noted difficulties in maintaining or improving their company culture, and worker productivity is still a concern. So again, we'll continue to see remote working, but it does have its advantages and disadvantages. The next trend we're going to see in the future is that companies will invest heavily in health, hygiene, and safety. A report from McKinsey & Company stated that 83% of executives actually expect to hire people for health and safety roles within their company within the next 2 years. And it is the business sector that is predicted to have the most hiring for the future. Employers will focus more on employee mental health, increasing EAP, employee assistance plan benefits, and adding more digital tools. We've seen that. Next, companies will continue to strive to increase diversity, inclusion, and equity. Fourth, workers will demand better treatment for themselves and for their community from their employers. We see that employees want their organizations to have like a social conscience, and so employees may pick the employer based on that. And organizations examine how they impact the environment. And then finally, number 6, technology's rapid transformation will continue to have companies rethinking about how to integrate people with machines. Things like virtual reality and digital and automated solutions are on the forefront of that trend. So with that, were there any final questions, Rachel, from the participants today?
There weren't. We can give everyone a minute if you have any additional questions that you want to ask Jennifer, so we can give you all just another moment. There will be a survey sent following this with just a few questions if people are willing to complete that survey. And then after you complete the survey, there will be a link for you to access the slides.
Here's my information, just with my law firm and contact information. And as Rachel said, there will be, the PowerPoint will be provided to all participants today.
Thank you, Jennifer, for a really great presentation with a lot of wonderful information. And thank you to those who joined. And if you are needing SHRM credit, Jennifer, what is the best way to go about that? Should they?
Okay, what will happen is if you are a SHRM, if you are looking for SHRM credits after the presentation, we will receive a list of anyone who had indicated they are from going through SHRM and needing the credits, and SHRM will send you an email with the code for that.